must have been around 16 years old when I've had my first parent-free alcoholic drink. My best friend from high school and I would often go to this rail yard not too far from where we grew up. We took us like grandma since I've been forward focused because I didn't have a car yet. My best friend's older sister was about 22 or 23 at this time, and it was essentially the connection we had to getting underage beers and hard lemonades. I believe my first parent-free drink was a Shiner Bock. To be honest, I really didn't get it. It wasn't the greatest thing I've ever tasted, not even close. And I really didn't understand the allure. And I couldn't imagine how adults, let alone myself, could drink a multitude of these bitter drinks at a time and actually enjoy it. I didn't know how adults could demand on something that tasted so shitty to make them happy, to be at peace, to feel whatever abstraction that normal was. The first time I got drunk changed everything for me. It was like a high that up until that point in my life, I've never experienced. It was almost surreal. My anxieties, my insecurities, my fears, any pain that I carried heavy in my heart completely and almost vanished. Alcohol became the elixir of life. To me, there was absolutely no downside. I was young, and my drinking wasn't obsessive yet, so I didn't fall off the wagon or get hungover. I felt almost invincible, but I think more accurately, I felt like a better version of myself. I felt like the confident person I always wanted to be. I felt like all the stress and the intrusive thoughts in my head had become virtually non-existent. I felt good. I understood why people became addicted. No one drinks because they like the flavor. You drink because you like the feeling. Or at least, if you're someone like me, that feels like you have to run away from yourself. You do. When I was about 18 years old, I had my first unfortunate taste of what the ugly side of drinking was. In particular, I learned that alcohol can be a double-edged sword. You can lose control of yourself in the drop of a hat. There's no telling how or when. I mean, when you get absurdly shit-faced, I'm sure you're just begging for your inner demons to come out. But to me, it was like Russian roulette. And unfortunately, this time, I wasn't as lucky with my drinking as I'd been in the past. It was during my trip to San Diego for the first time. I went with the same aforementioned best friend. I had broken up with my long-term girlfriend of several years, and I was on the boys' R&R trip that I needed. To this day, probably one of the most memorable trips of my life. Freedom smelled like the fresh beach air and tasted like cheap sangria wine. We were staying in a motel, and we figured we could commemorate our trip by indulging in several bottles of Capricos. We probably drank the most I ever drank up until that point in my life, and we were laughing and joking the more drunk we got. And then, all of a sudden, I lost it. My subconscious took over in the driver's seat, and it's almost like that scene from Get Out. I felt like I had a front row seat to watching my own meltdown. And for the sake of privacy for my friend, I'll leave the details of our argument out of this, but essentially an argument turned into an all-out fight. Luckily, he was clearer headed than me, and I was too drunk to actually throw any sort of real punch, so it looked like a really very shitty WWE cage match. But he was able to get me to settle down, and that was right before I erupted into a tearful, Chernobyl-esque meltdown. To be frank, I was sad. I was really sad. This will be a common theme as these stories go on, but I want to make this clear that that's not an excuse for any of my behavior. I fully take responsibility for my drinking every single time I've gotten drunk and acted out of bad faith. But my state of mind wasn't exactly great either, even if I didn't know how bad it was. It's hard to say what exactly I was sad about, and it's easy to point the finger and say that at the time, seeing my 3-year relationship crumble apart was the tipping point. I finally think that the rabbit hole goes way deeper than that. This was years upon years of repression surfacing out. That's the ugly side of alcohol. You can only drown your feelings for so long until they erupt like an underwater volcano. At that point, you're fucked. You're at the mercy of your subconscious and of the drink. Needless to say, I went off on my best friend. I said some pretty awful things, and it did nothing to make me feel better after the fact. My best friend at the time saw that I was in a lot of pain. He said something incredibly profound that I still often think about to this day, and it was the last conscious thing I remember before I succumbed to blacking out. It was a quote by the late Jim Valvano, a true basketball legend. The quote was to the effect of, "If you laugh, you think, you cry, that's a full day. That's a heck of a day. You do that 7 days a week, you're going to have something special." Well, certainly, in my case, I definitely did 2 of those 3 things. You could say the thinking department didn't come into work that night. But the next day, after an awkward car ride, we talked about it. I apologized and told him I had no idea where that came from. He listened and forgave. I thought, and I reflected. It scared me to think that this person was inside of me, that I could do that. And I don't consider myself a destructive person. I don't even consider myself a violent person. At least, I don't believe so. But time after time, unfortunately, that ugly face would show itself. I would love to stand here and say that this never happened again. I learned that drinking is the devil and I never drank a drop of alcohol ever again. But unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. The cycle basically worked like this from this point on, over several years actually. I took long periods from drinking, then I would slowly but surely start up the slippery slope of seductive illusions. And once again, I would break down from the unsustainability that I was feeling inside. It was a violent and vicious cycle. Stop drinking, triggers come back in full effect. Think I have control of my drinking again. Continually, over a period of time, push my limits further and further, push myself too far, break down, rampage, damage control, repeat. Before I go any deeper into this pity party, I kind of want to discuss what exactly seductive illusions are, because you're probably thinking it's some sort of sexy magician or something. When I decided to start taking responsibility for myself in an attempt to get a handle on my drinking around the age of 23, I started attending therapy. While in therapy, probably within the first session, my psychiatrist talked to me about the concept of seductive illusions in our everyday life. And for someone like me who doesn't like dealing with inner turmoil, I apparently fucking love seductive illusions. Essentially, the basic gist is that these are everyday vices or distractions that we use to supplement or avoid something that we might find uncomfortable, painful, etc., or a way to seek pleasure, gratification, and meaning. Some good examples are smoking, drinking, prostitution, strip clubs, drugs, etc. While these are extreme examples, they are all 100% seductive illusions. And at this point, I was pretty much neck deep in seductive illusions. And I really do sincerely regret not getting help sooner for what I'm about to talk about next. The tipping point for me was at a work-related event. I don't really like talking about this story nowadays because, frankly, it's a massive cluster of embarrassment, shame, pain that I don't really care to explore in this video. Long story short, this is by far the worst instance of drinking meltdowns that I've ever seen in my entire life. It was so bad, actually, that I couldn't recall a whole 75% of what I did that night, and had to have people the next day painfully retell me all the embarrassing, shameful, and quite frankly awful things that I said and did. I had to be forcibly escorted out of the event like some sort of mental asylum patient gone off the wagon and was being sent to the white padded room. I'm severely downplaying this moment because honestly the details are so much worse, and again, I think the longer time passes, the more I hate reliving that moment in my mind. It's a story probably for another time, I promise. I honestly hate that memory. I relive it in my mind almost every single day because to me it was that bad. I hated not having control over my body. I hated not being able to control my mind. I hated that my emotions were irradiating off of me like some supercharged nuclear explosion. Everyone got affected and everyone around me got hurt. I'm thankful for this moment though, because the worst wasn't even the event, not by a long shot. It was the damage and aftermath that I directly caused. The people I hurt, the people that were my best friends, the people I cared about, the people I loved, all devastated and deeply damaged by my actions and words. And frankly, you can't take that back. And unfortunately, I had to learn that the hard way. Alcoholism is taken so lightly in our day and age. I feel like it's almost expected and normalized. And granted, I understand most people don't act like me when they get extremely shit-faced and just leap on the middle of the road instead. I mean, more power to you if you're that person, but I never thought I was that kind of person either until it happened. Alcoholism is serious. It's devastating no matter how much pain and discomfort you're in now. I'll tell you from experience that it's 1,000 times worse when the ugly side comes out and you can't control that agony. you won't know who's going to get hit in the crosshairs, because you don't get to choose. You don't get to think. You don't get to feel how you want. You don't get to hide. Your subconscious and the alcohol is going to win every single time when you get to that point of no return. I'm not going to bash anyone that drinks. I still love to drink, believe it or not, but I know now what I'm capable of. That scares me enough to keep myself in moderation. I live with those memories every single day. I cringe, I feel ashamed, and honestly, it makes me feel like a terrible person when I think about the next day after a night like that. People don't see you the same way after witnessing something so shocking and revealing like that, and you can never get that back. If you make the decision to drink, more power to you. I can only humbly provide to you some words of advice that I received while I was in therapy and that I found helpful from time to time. Number 1 is moderation is godliness. Aristotle said it best when he spoke about the golden mean. Alcohol is great when you're out with the boys or girls, I don't discriminate, and you need that little boost of confidence to speak with that attractive person at the end of the bar. It's very complimentary with a side of wings. Hey, especially on game days. It's fantastic at concerts. But it's easy to lose yourself. And your purpose is not to have fun, but to avoid pain. And sometimes that's not always clear. If you don't feel like you're in a good headspace, honestly, just stick to water. I mean, no one who's worth having around is going to shame you or judge you for choosing to drink water at a bar or club. Sometimes you enjoy things more if you weren't chased. Moderation is a beautiful thing, and knowing your limits will also be beneficial to you while you choose to drink. The other thing that I wanted to suggest is objectively playing the tape forward. What I mean by that is, before preferably you start drinking, really ponder why it is that you want to drink, and what will be the repercussions of your drinking. Am I going to feel good with myself tomorrow? Not just hangover-wise either, but am I going to be able to look myself in the mirror and be happy with what I see? Am I drinking to avoid pain? Am I drinking to avoid discomfort? The idea is to play the metaphorical videotape forward all the way through and not get narrow-minded of what's happening right that second. Think about tomorrow, because it is important. If you feel like you'd answer in a way you might regret your decision later, I'd say hold off. I'm assuming you're young. You have plenty of times to get intoxicated in your young life. Don't pick a day where your head isn't right. And trust me, from experience, please just don't. You're going to hurt yourself, or worse, you're going to hurt someone else. Especially if you make the stupid decision to drive while intoxicated. At that point, you're playing God with someone else's life. And trust me, as much as my conscience weighs on me a lot of the time, I'm grateful that I've never killed anyone because of my poor life choices. Please get an Uber or a friend to drive you if you feel drunk or buzzed. It's literally never worth it. It's literally never worth killing someone over. So there it is. A very long and ranty video about my often toxic relationship with alcoholism and seductive illusions. Frankly, I'm not out of the woods yet, but I'm in a place where I can reevaluate, work through my negative feelings, and come to a natural place where that if I choose to drink again in my life, I won't hurt others or myself in the process. It's hard, and it's really hard sometimes, actually, because of the mental conditioning that I've gone through. But I'm doing better every single day, so I'm grateful for that. I hope that you're doing okay. I hope that if you are struggling with alcoholism, that you tell somebody, a friend, a colleague, a parent, if you feel really ballsy, as someone did, and I learned that my family has a long history of problems with alcoholism. It made me feel like I had a better understanding of myself and why I feel the pull stronger than others might. But please get help. You're a beautiful person with value. You're not your addiction, you're not the bottle. You can always change starting today. Change is good. Change is necessary sometimes. At least I know it was for me. I'll leave you with these parting words and something to think about the next time you get in a breakup, get fired, or find yourself in a very stressful situation and you feel the pull to want to drink. The first words my therapist said to me in regards to my drinking when I walked into that faithful first session was this: do I control the drink, or does the drink control me? Ponder that. Until then, my friend, please take care of yourself. Sincerely,